welcome back to another episode. We have Lyra here today.
Hello.
And, we've just been trying to skirt through the local news, media development. Not a lot happening, right? But there are some interesting things. We just want to kind of change the pace today going into local. But of course, the whole world, the media is still very much dominated by what happened in that nation in the West, right? But in terms of local news, is there anything that really caught your attention the last couple of weeks?
Well, I guess I think one of the interesting thing is our Prime Minister has been very, very quiet about the whole. I mean, he's no longer so vocal. I mean, I think he's a bit cautious about how Trump would treat Asia in general, especially ASEAN countries like Southeast Asia and things like that.
Yep.
So I think it is kind of like a good change because, I mean, for the past 2 years, we have been saying that, hey, I mean, are we having a prime minister for Malaysia or are we having a prime minister for the Palestinians? So I think that's kind of like a good change for Malaysians where you begin to have like, okay, let's begin to focus on what's in it for Malaysia.
Yeah. And it's really interesting because the last time we were here recording, Turkey President Erdogan was here for 2 days. But after that, you didn't hear a lot of announcement, a lot of fanfare, and a lot of people were expecting, some kind of resistance to Trump's absurd Gaza plan. But we are not hearing anything. But anyway, since we talk about that, and I think it kind of impact Malaysia because of the interest our Prime Minister is putting on. I mean, even locally, you can see there are people who are not very happy with... it is not... I don't think Malaysians generally are against Palestine or Gaza, no. It's just that they felt there are so many more pressing things happening here in Malaysia. Why are we so busybody? There's steel tariff, there's all this kind of thing that is happening that will impact ASEAN more. Why are we looking away? But one of the things, of course, we haven't talked about it here. Even in Malaysia, we see some opinion pieces. People try to ridicule Trump's proposal. But one interesting thing I saw is really, at least now people are talking about, well, if we can't have two-state solution, what are the other solutions? So Egypt, Jordan, all these people are trying to come up with a Middle East solution, which is better than 50 years of rehashing the same.
Yeah, I think it's kind of interesting because, I mean, you have like the CCP high-ranking official that is like trying to, basically in UN, just trying to say that, hey, attention has been much paid to Russia, Ukraine, but how about Gaza here? And I mean, he's still trying to talk about like two-state solution. And I think at such a time when, I mean, basically Israel just received literally like corpse back. And I think the most, the Bibas children were like one of the most, for lack of better words, the iconic of the hostages that were being held captive by the Hamas. I think this might not be a good time at all to talk about, hey, the two-state solution. I think they might not have that sort of appetite when the whole nation is like mourning for the death. And I don't think people have that sort of appetite at all for two-state solution. And I think really people are trying to like just, hey, let's have a fresh perspective over this whole thing, and let's just take a step back and begin to think. I mean, is there any logic to what President Trump was suggesting? Can we actually make this place, which was traumatic, into something that is literally beautiful?
Yeah, that's the thing we've been saying, right? Even the last few episodes, of course, we talk about DOGE and all the things that Trump has been doing. That's very, very unconventional from a normal political point of view. So, talk about two-state solution. Is this something that people have been... I mean, even you ask a high school person, you ask university person, you ask someone in their 40s, almost everyone can rehash the term two-state solution. But then when you ask, what are the details, how are you ensuring that the civilian Palestinians will be free from terrorists? Because basically the last 10 years, you saw how Hamas used the civilian as human shield. Now, of course, you can make an argument for it or against whether they are willing participant or not. But assuming they are not willing, they have no other option. We assuming. Then, I mean, this is just the thing that has been saying on and on. But finally, you have maybe a different solution. Now, of course, I mean, when I look at China, I find it very funny because they were the one that was supporting Iran, Hezbollah, and all those kind of things that indirectly, remember after October last year, what happened? They kind of very neutral and in fact, I would say they are neutral / towards supporting the Iran regime. So, and that's why recently they changed their ambassador to Israel because, the commentary was that they are now very worried because Trump basically came in and said, well, we shouldn't consider two-state solution for now because it hasn't worked. So what say you all? I mean, that's all he's saying, it's nothing controversial and it's causing people to scramble. But anyway, we're only talking a little bit more on this because our Prime Minister has very special interest in this. And definitely if our country has any involvement with Palestine, I really sincerely hope he will take account of the feedback of the people. It hasn't been very positive in a general sense.
Yeah, I mean, like just now you were talking about DOGE, especially the expose that is coming out. And I think I can't help but think of this sort of analytical article that was by Rahim Kassam. And he kind of like just talk about Trump is right to shutter USAID and ex-founder JFK would likely agree. And it kind of like just made me ponder on the whole, like basically the whole mentality that Malaysians have because we are so used to handout cultures. And I think it would be mind-blowing if people knew that President JFK didn't even mean that the USAID is going to be like a forever aid sort of concept. And the thing is, when the nation that they are trying to support, the less developed countries that they are trying to support, when they are able to basically be self-starter, basically able to come to that place of like improvement and things like that, basically there will be a cutoff date for the so-called forever aid. And yet, I think the contention in what is happening in Ukraine, I think it's like because I think President Trump is literally just coming off from that place where, hey, you are ripping us off and you have to pay back. So, I mean, now, of course, I mean, there's many talks how Ukraine is going to pay back. Maybe there is vested interest in US, like taking profit of half of the exports. And maybe it might work out for Ukraine. I mean, because now that there is vested interest from the United States and maybe there will be like more security that is being, I mean, obviously they have to guard their exports and things like that. But coming back to Malaysia, it's just, I think I'm just beginning to think, hey, would we ever come to that place where subsidy is no longer needed? I mean, because that's the whole thing that is basically just causing a large group of Malaysians not being able to voice out as they like to do.
Yeah, and of course, to the credit of the Madani government, they are trying to do subsidy rationalization, which is, I mean, I think most people who are for, to move us into the future, you can't continue to hand out, I mean, all kind of subsidy, but of course, the main subsidy they are talking about now is petroleum subsidy. But of course, the other side of the argument will be, well, we are petroleum producing nations, shouldn't we pay less for petroleum? But I think a lot of people don't realize that it's our number one export. And if you kind of give it free to the people, what is there to export?
Well, I think it kind of like go back to the concept of like, hey, let's say you want to have business and you want to have like a partner. Would a partner that pays for like a portion of the share be more appreciative than, let's say, another person whom you just decided to, hey, let's just be a bit more empathetic and just give out shares for free? I think when the thing is, I think history has proven over and over again, if you're being given some freebies, you're likely less appreciative of it. I think that's just human nature. It's not to say that we are discrediting certain group of people who definitely do need some help in like just getting started. I mean, so I think that's why the whole concept of rationalization or subsidy is so interesting. But if you're always coming from that place where, hey, the rich don't deserve this, but you also have to think, hey, actually they also work very, very hard for this. I mean, you don't want to be like some socialist country where it becomes, I mean, there comes a day when there is no incentive at all to work hard. So I don't think that will actually help the nation to progress.
Yeah, interesting you use the word socialist because there's so much socialism undermining our country. And even, one of the topic we're just looking at, of course, it's an election season for DAP, right? And I find it very interesting that a lot of the leaders come out and say our roots are socialism.
I beg to differ.
Yeah, I mean, I think for them, they believe so. And this is the danger because always reminded by Margaret Thatcher who say, well, if you adopt socialism, eventually the money runs out. So I think even our leaders in the unity government, I think they are realizing it. That's why you have subsidy realization. And for so long, I mean, it has been months since the diesel rationalization began, right? I mean, look at the raw 95 realization. I think the government is like so fearful to do it because, again, I can't help, everything that is happening in the political landscape, locally or internationally, everything will be compared with what Trump is doing because he's just so different. And when you look at what DOG is doing, putting people like headset and RFK, it's like, wow, are you trying to drop an atomic bomb in the cabinet? And I look at Malaysia, it's just like, do we have leaders who have courage to do it? Just do it, right? I mean, those days we thought, Rafizi always say give the tough points, but when it comes to execution, I mean, of course, I do understand the constraint, and it's not easy, but will we find someone having the courage and eventually given the green light to do it?
Yeah, I guess it's definitely not easy to clean house.
Yeah, and talk about just a different gear, right? I mean, since we talk about subsidies, something related, of course, Petroleum Development Act. And I mean, that's like an entire can of worm. But recently, did you hear what Prime Minister was saying, right? That PDA still applies. And I think it's causing quite a stir from the activists. Of course, Sarawak Premier is kind of like, whatever, we get our gas distribution right and things like that. But what's your feeling about, I mean, of course, we talk about PDA and we're like, it requires a lot of research just to know where we stand. Because did you, I mean, just what I'm feeling and see if you agree with that. Whatever they discuss and even what the newspaper were reporting is like very vague, very non-specific. And it's like, yeah, we're negotiating. Okay, now we're all good friends already. I mean, I just felt like GPS is like bullshitting us like that. But I don't know, that's my feeling. What's your take on all these things? Do they already have a deal and say, let's just come out, do some wayang kulit, and hopefully people will see that, hey, GPS is for decentralization and things like that. But when they are still best of friends.
Well, it's tough to say. I mean, obviously, I hope that the Premier has best interest for Sarawak. And I mean, hopefully that paves the way for Sabah as well. And also other oil producing states. But the thing is, coming back to this topic, I felt like the Prime Minister is trying to kind of put a leverage on the Premier. It's like you get what you want, but that has always been the modus operandi. I mean,
between federal and state, right?
Exactly.
That's how they dominated.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about like legalized corruption in Sarawak, which we are no stranger to. And I mean, if we were to compare both the corruption index between states, I mean, between Sarawak versus the whole country or at the federal level, I think probably easily Sarawak would be like, I don't know, double, triple the sort of corruption scale that you see in West Malaysia. But coming back to this, maybe there is vested interest on both sides. I do feel like there's a lot of compromise that goes behind the scene.
Do you mean like maybe they want to maintain certain status quo?
I think so, but they have to appear to be a bit reformative.
Oh, of course. I mean, to be fair, they have done something, like they gotten leverage on education, they got leverage on certain things. Basically, federal government just don't bother with what's happening there. In return of political support, obviously.
But I kind of like what Stephen Miller was saying recently concerning like a lot of people are like, hey, why is Elon Musk like it? I mean, what's he doing here? He's like quote unquote unelected. So But the thing is, he kind of like he was just giving people some civic lessons, and basically he was just trashing all the sort of bullshit that is concerning the unelected. He said, hey, you have a president that is been elected and he got like even the popular vote, and his mandate since day one was to clean house.
Yep.
And basically he just hired a person there because basically the whole executive decision lies on a president. Like, it's not plural. So I mean, so he kind of like just giving a bit of backdrop concerning that, and he say what is dangerous is that you have a lot of unelected bureaucrats that is running the show behind the scene. I think what is happening in Malaysia here is because, I mean, not just premier, I mean, even prime minister, I mean, they have so much to answer to. So I think there's like a lot of, I mean, for lack of better words, like shadow cabinets that is going behind the scene. And you have so many of these unelected people to basically, the mouths have to be feed. So I think because of that, you can't like do too much. You can't rock the boat too much. I mean, even you have like our former minister, KJ. I mean, it's good that he was talking about, hey, we need to do a bit of reform, retraining of the civil servants. But the thing is, we are one of the most bloated. I mean, we have one of the most bloated civil service in the world, and you're talking about no retrenchment. And hey, how do you ensure the productivity? I mean, even just recently, I mean, my company was having this leadership training, and it's kind of interesting because I think there has been misconception concerning people first. Hey, does that mean that in the event of conflict between company's interest and my interest as the employee, which one comes first? Because you say, hey, your vision is people first. Then to a point that the MD has to clarify, he say, people first, but first and foremost, you must remember the reason why this company exists. It is first and foremost an economic entity.
Yeah.
So how can
to make profit?
Exactly. I mean, profitability is always top priority. I say when all this thing is met and you're also contributing to it, I mean, the company will be generous with payouts, but not, you can't demand if you can't even contribute to a small percentage of the revenue. So I thought it's kind of the same concept. I mean, not to say that I think there's a lot of arguments about, hey, like I mean, we also have like the former Menteri of Selangor, Tan Sri Khalib, who kind of ran Selangor like how he ran a
corporation.
Yes, exactly. And people are a little bit apprehensive about it. I mean, and also there's that sort of comparison with how Trump is running the whole United States. So some people are a little bit like, let's not be too optimistic about this whole thing. So I thought it was kind of interesting because at least now Malaysians are beginning to think about that sort of
model
direction
that exists.
Yeah, but they are also like, hey, I'm not sure because we have sort of seen it tested out here in Selangor and it didn't quite work well because he's just like literally whipping the people and whipping the whole state into shape. But how? So I think people can't separate President Trump from a dictatorship. I think here, I mean, that's the whole challenge here.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at DOGE, I think about something that is a bit comparable would be like those days, the department, the transformation department under Idris Jala, who is a prime minister. Basically, he brought in a lot of KPI, standard and things like that. So while if you set a benchmark and you set a target to be met and you say that's a dictator, then you are not fit for work. But of course, I mean, then you have someone like Mahathir, for example. Mahathir is iron fist, right? And during his time, you can argue that the executive, the prime minister office especially, was so powerful, and even Najib time also. I mean, because of all the years of control and things like that. But your point about having so many mouths to feed, I think the term they use in Malaysia is little Napoleon, right? Yeah. And really, I think it's very, very true because, just when you deal with a project with government department and things like that, and they'll be like, look, you have to think about this, you have to think about that. I mean, there's always a joke, right, in the government department that the most powerful person is the KSU, the chief secretary. And in terms of operational decision, I think there's, without a shadow of doubt, the most influential person in civil service and government. Now, of course, the prime minister go into a place and he sees something he doesn't like, of course he can easily override that. That will be piece of cake in Malaysia. But the thing is, Prime Minister doesn't take the time to do all these things. In fact, most of the cabinet minister doesn't have the time to really turun padang in a very detailed way. It's just not possible. And if they want to do it, they may get a lot of pushback and things like that. So, yeah, I mean, it's just, I mean, it's interesting we talk about, separation of power and then DOGE and how that will even look like in Malaysia, right? I mean, I think it's like, well, can it happen? Of course it can happen, because in many ways, the entrenchment of system in US, I would say, is even worse than Malaysia. I mean, the way they control the money going to foreign entity is so sophisticated. It's very sophisticated.
Did you read about the report where, I mean, was it Stacey Abrams?
Oh yeah, she's getting billions, right? And it's like, wow, they're just enriching themselves. No wonder the Democrats are fuming, and not only Democrats, a lot of establishment, Republican and things like that. But the only difference, of course, is the MAGA has mobilized enough. So, just recently, I think now you have seen the top level cabinet appointment, but actually the next level is maybe even more important because they are the one carrying out. So I think there's one deputy assistant for defense department, one guy who just really want to go in and fix. And even Senator Tom Cotton was like, initially say he doesn't want, Tom Cotton's supposed to be, I mean, not, okay, I won't call him MAGA, but he's definitely not Rhino, right? But he is, those, what's a military complex, those people with a lot of, they have vested interest, put it that way. So initially he was like not going to support this guy, and you see people like Charlie Kirk and things like that say, well, if you don't confirm, you will get primary. And the next thing you see is he is going to meet this guy. So you can force change, but you have to be accountable. And this is one of the things that we didn't talk about so much. I mean, we talk about some of the more famous names and things like that, but there are so many unsung heroes able to make a difference, mainly because Elon Musk bought Twitter, changed it to ads, and allowed the conservative voice to come in.
Yeah, I'm so glad you talk about this because, I've been thinking, how would these sort of transformative changes happen in Malaysia? Because, first and foremost, let's face the truth. We don't really have freedom of speech here.
Yeah.
Because everything is just so monitored, so sanitized, and we can't even begin to express our opinion so freely. Because
it's ironic you say this, because I would say during Mahathir's time, because of his so-called commitment to those day multimedia super corridor, no censorship for 10 years. I would say during those 10 years, we have more freedom of speech.
Exactly.
And so now a reformer prime minister is causing us to regress. It's not me saying all these things, all the civil society, bar council, people like Abinga and things like that, not happy.
Yeah, if we don't have freedom of speech, I don't think, because how do you cause Senator Tom Cotton to just basically like, hey, let's hear them out? It's because Charlie Kirk is so successful in the media mountain. And basically he could just literally rally support through his podcast. And obviously he has teams on the ground. I think if Malaysians have this sort of avenue and you could just talk without having to like just be concerned that you're going to be thrown into jail, I think people will be more willing to voice out and even really begin to put in some constructive feedbacks and constructive ideas and maybe even begin to mobilize. I think because Malaysia politics, we were just talking during dinner that, hey, you can't really separate a lot of the politics in Malaysia from activism. We just have that sort of root. So I guess why not just sort of like put it into good use in the sense that, hey, let's rally the right kind of support. You go into, if the ministers don't have time to go into the grassroots movements, why not you have allowed freedom of speech and you have this group of people that literally help you to literally turun padang and just do the work.
And I think Elon Musk kind of shows us the model, because now remember Charlie Kirk was banned from Twitter also. And then he was on Getter, he was on Rumble, and so these are the smaller social media. But then when he was allowed to return to ads, I think that's when he really reached a mainstream level of recognition. I mean, today he is like, I'll say he's considered one of the most well-known conservative influencer in the whole country. I think a lot of people outside America also know him. So even when Trump Jr. went to Greenland, remember, Charlie Kirk was part of the entourage.
Yeah.
So, he has a direct line to Trump and things like that. So, but what makes that happen? So imagine in Malaysia, it will be like someone really, really like so filthy rich that the governmental arena cannot just alienate him. And he's like, well, I'm going to buy this. I'm going to go for freedom of speech. You want me to invest in Malaysia? You have to open to that. So it's a bit like what people were saying. I think it was Rahim Kassan, or I can't remember, is it him or another person? Oh no, I think it is Alex Marlow or Breitbart. He said, well, if you cannot get the big tech to cooperate, you have to kind of compel them, quote unquote compel. And by the way, related to this is the new administration in US. I think the FTC, Federal Technology Commissioner, is now opening an investigations on all the big tech on censorship. Because before you do a investigation, you normally kind of open people to give comment. What's your experience with censorship? So I think Alun Bukhari, I think he wrote a very, very impressive book called Deleted, right, about how basically the freedom of speech is taken away. So he said that, well, this is a prelude to investigation. So people are a bit worried, right, when the tech bros all show up in the inaugurations. But Trump is not compromising because they have to pay a price. So it's like, well, I can accept you, but you cannot continue to censor people. It doesn't work that way. And you see what J.D. Vance was doing in Europe.
Bashing.
I mean, a lot of people don't quite understand, but it's very, very simple. A one-line summary is he's telling Europe, he's telling Germany, he's telling Romania, he's telling UK, don't expect us to defend you if you don't defend freedom of speech. We don't defend tyrants like you. I mean, they were like so pissed off, right?
Yeah, but that is so well put.
Very well put. And that's why many people believe it's going to be a historical speech. They will hate it now, but 50 years later, I think people will look at it and say, wow, that's a turning point if Europe ever shifted.
Well, hopefully they get red pill.
Well, we have been saying we want to kind of keep it local, but we kind of keep it local, right? And
that's the starting point.
But anyway, I think our time is kind of running short. But let's quickly talk about one thing, which I think we want to explore in future episodes. We talk about affirmative action, and that's like the elephant in the room, right? The monkey around your neck. It's just very hard to shake it off. But really, really, personally, I felt like because of what has happened. I mean, you look at a country like United States, right? So based on merits, they're based on ability, and they're not shy about that. So even in 10, 20 years, they could introduce DI that kind of paralyze the whole thing. It just shows that it cannot be taken for granted. Then, of course, in Malaysia, we always had this issue. I mean, from the time the Reid Commission talk about it, I mean, like UMNO has a lot of concern, and which is legitimate. But remember, Tunku at that time kept saying it's temporary. Malay will eventually catch up. Don't worry, it cannot be forever. I mean, they all say that, right? Even Mahathir himself said the Tongkat cannot remain forever. So I think in general, if you say affirmative action is bad, I don't think you'll get everyone on the street throw stones at you in Malaysia because they know it's bad. I'm talking about every race.
I mean, they know it's bad, but can they live without it?
Yeah, it's like you're on coke like that, right? I mean, the cocaine coke, right? Not the Coke Zero coke. And and then how do you get out? So, but anyway, I think that's a topic that, I mean, there's no easy solution, but we want to get, I mean, we said it a few times already, but I think we're really going to do it, right? Some of our friends from university, different race, different industry, and everywhere we see, I mean, it's very funny, our friend Colin just came, right? Every Friday he's here, right? And and we're just talking about, hey, if today we say, well, we have an Indian lawyer and I have an Indian staff. I asked the Indian staff to go and deal because it will smoothen the thing. It's like common sense, right? But in today snowflake kind of society, people will say it's racist, right? I mean, it's like, hey, in Cebu, you want to deal with Fuchao, saying someone who is fluent with Fuchao, I think you get a deal done faster. It's just common sense. So I don't know why we have become so, our emotion is like so glassy, so
Easily
easily.
tersinggung.
Yeah, exactly. But I do have hope because I feel like the new generation, especially those who went through, I mean, I see the high school kids and, they go through the COVID time, and nowadays you talk to an average 16, 17, 18-year-old, they want to go to, during our time, yeah, it's not cheap, go overseas for university education, but it's doable if you're kind of like upper middle class. But now it's like, wow, you're going to have to sell a few shops just to send one or two kids. So it's a different time now, and maybe just because of the hardship, people might wake up that this is not going to help us in long run.
Yep.
But anyway, I think that's all the time we have for today. And if you have any questions and things, I will try to address those maybe in the upcoming episodes.
Sure.
Until
Let's
next
run
time.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.